Rafael, Leo, this I've been teasing it. There's a great fundraising creative idea from Paul Street. You want to talk a little bit about it?
Yeah, it's gonna be next Saturday, June 29th, at 2 p.m. The details are on actually the RevCom's Instagram account, and it's on the screen right now. But you can also find it at the RevCom's and the RevCom Core Chicago Instagram accounts. So this is for people that don't know Paul Street. Paul Street is a revolutionary historian who actually, knows a tremendous amount about Chicago. He actually taught the history of Chicago for years, and knows a lot about working class history and African American history. And he's going to be doing a tour of Chicago's South Side, and it's called and actually Leo's going to be part of that tour. Leo also, grew up in Chicago and knows a lot about Chicago. Partly this whole idea was inspired because Paul and Leo gave me a tour when I first got to Chicago of the city, and we're just going around. We started in the north, we went to the west, we went through the Latino neighborhoods, some Little Village, some of these other areas, Pilsen. Then we went down to the south side, and everywhere we were going, Leo and Paul were pointing out different places and their significance, right? And Paul in particular really is an expert on the history of Chicago, as I mentioned. And so this is going to be called From the Deep South to Mass Incarceration, a tour of Chicago's South Side. This 2-hour tour will take you to sites of hope and despair, resistance and repression, and I'm not going to read the rest of it, but they're starting out, after World War I, going through all the way up to the present, what the horrors that Black people have been through in Chicago. There was like white racist race riots, basically, where white mobs just mass murdered Black people in Chicago. People don't know this history. There's also important history of resistance. There's the history of the kind of jobs that Black people were able to get when they came up north, fleeing, from the South, and then there's also what happened afterwards when a lot of these jobs got sent overseas, and the housing projects that got torn down, So Paul Street's going to be bringing a lot of insight about this and what it says about, this whole history of Chicago and the Black experience in Chicago, what this says about the nature of this system, but also the revolutionary potential of Black people and other oppressed people, the resistance that we've seen at different points throughout this, this whole history, and the hope that we have a responsibility now to realize, and the only way it can be by overthrowing the system that's been a nightmare for Black people and so many other people for so long. So did you want to you're going to be part of this tour? So
yeah, no, like I'm excited to be a part of this tour, just from like touring around with Paul and Rafa, where, look, there's a lot of history, right, of resistance, a lot of history of like rebellion, and a lot of history of rising up here in Chicago. And, I'm excited for, the people that do like donate to be a part of this, and actually go into, what has the history of this country been, where have people like stood up against oppression, and, where have people like resisted the crimes and outrages, right? And, bring out, the need for this summer, to make this a summer of, not, as Rafa started off, look, not a summer of violence, not a summer where, the oppressed people are caught up fighting and killing each other, or getting, drawn off into this divide and conquer scheme, but making this a summer to actually really put revolution on the map, and bring out, there's a whole better way that we could be living, and relating to each other, that doesn't require, just people fucking over each other, and bringing out, you know, that, you know, and some of the history of this city in particular, you know, and some of these important places where, you know, people have no idea, you know, of what's going on, the history, the resistance, but bringing that out and taking that all the way to fruition.
So wherever you are, if you're in Chicago, you should definitely be there next June 29th, next Saturday, you know. But also, honestly, I would, if I was like in, you know, somewhere else in the Midwest or anywhere, you know, within like a few hundred miles, I would get to Chicago next Saturday to go on this tour with Paul Street. You will learn a lot, you know, and you'll also contribute. They're asking $75 to $100 to contribute to this revolution. So,
you know, that is such a community forging, like revolutionary culture and community forging way to collectively raise money. It's such a beautiful use of his talents and his skills and knowledge. It's going to enrich the experience. I wish I could be there in Chicago, and I want to encourage everybody in the area to do what Leo and Rafael just said, sign up for it.